Good afternoon. We are live, Nathan? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, Delegate Jazz Lewis, Chair of the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee of Appropriations. I am glad everyone was able to make it out here today. It's still chilly, but not as cold as it has been, so thankful for that. Today we have two hearings, one on the State Department of Assessments and Taxation and the other on the Property Tax Assessment Appeals Board. We're going to begin with the Property Tax Assessment Appeals Board first today. So we're going to have the analysis by David, then any questions from my colleagues, and then Ms. Wiggins and there you are. And anyone else from the Appeals Board who may be joining you can approach. And then we'll go to SSTAT after that, okay? So you can wait until after DLS analysis. I just wanted to give you a heads up how it's going to go. David, you can begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Property Tax Assessment Appeals Board, or the Board, is an independent agency that hears appeals related to the assessment of property in the state. There is one local board in each county in Baltimore City for a total of 24, all of which are supported by a central office and an executive director. Each local board has 4 to 6 members who are appointed by the governor for 5-year terms. The board's fiscal 2026 budget increases by about $47,000 or 3.7% to $1.3 million. Exhibit 1 on page 2 visualizes the agency's fiscal 26 allowance. 85% is allocated for regular and contractual personnel. Other operational expenses and state cost allocations account for 9%, and rent comprises the remaining 6%. Exhibit 2 on page 3 highlights the biggest changes between fiscal 2025 and 2026. Salary increases and associated fringe benefits increased by $116,000, and employee and retiree health insurance decreases by $77,000, among other small changes. The board's personnel data can be found on page 4, and as of December 31st, 2024, there is 1 vacant administrative position. The bottom of page 4 brings us to issue number 1, which is that the board did not submit any updated managing for results data. The agency cited the departure of staff as the reason, and on October 31st, 2024, the governor announced the appointment of an acting administrator. The Department of Legislative Services recommends adopting committee narrative requesting that the board provide its fiscal 2026 MFR submission with actual calendar 2023 data and calendar 2024 and 2025 estimates by July 15th, 2025. Exhibit 3 on page 5 contains data up to calendar year 22 on the number of appeals received, cleared, and pending at the end of the year, along with the appeals clearance rate, which is the number of appeals cleared divided by the number of appeals received. After experiencing some disruptions at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, the board greatly improved its clearance rate in subsequent years and reduced its backlog to 2018 levels. Exhibit 4 on page 6 displays the percentage of decisions appealed to the Maryland Tax Court and the percentage of appeals that were reversed by the tax court. The board's goal is to have less than 10% of decisions appealed to the tax court, and it has met this goal in most years since calendar 2015. Another objective of the board is to reduce the number of reversals by the tax court, as a reversal may indicate an oversight in fairness or accuracy. After decreasing from highs of over 20% of appeals reversed in calendar 2015 through 2017, tax court reversals have generally been less than or equal to 10% since calendar 2018, except for calendar 2019 when the reversal rate was 13%. The reversal rate in calendar 2022 was 5% and is estimated to be 7% in calendar 2023. In its fiscal 2025 budget testimony, the board attributed this trend to its new hire training and periodic training for board members as needed. The board should comment on when it instituted changes to training for new board members and ongoing training for other board members. Page 7 contains the recommended committee narrative language regarding submission of MFR data, and that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, David. Colleagues, any questions? Seeing none, Ms. Wiggins, you can approach and give your testimony when you're ready. Thank you for making a trip.
You ready? PTAB did not submit updating management for results performance data for fiscal year 2026 allowance. The agency actually didn't have staff at that particular time, and when I came in, it was already past due. So I have committed to providing this information by July 15th of 2025.
Thank you. Is that all?
Yes.
Okay. I believe one of my colleagues has a question. Delegate Chang.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for being here. And the question I have is that for each of the jurisdictions around the state of Maryland with the boards, do you have any idea as far as if there's any vacancies in any of the jurisdictions, or are they pretty filled up with the members who serve on the boards?
The appointments office has made about 27 appointments in the past year. And so that's why the training is so important. We have so many new board members.
Okay, great, thank you. And then as far as you know, are the boards able to function with the membership that currently exists, or there are vacancies out there as far as board?
There are a couple of challenges where there are not enough members, or they either have conflicts of interest, so they aren't able to hear certain things that come up.
Sure.
Cases.
Sure. And do you have any ideas, like off the top of your head, specifically which jurisdictions have these complexities?
There's two. Talbot comes to mind, and I think there's one other one that I can't remember right now, but there's only two that have that. And I'm working with the NAG to come up with a solution.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And if we may be able to help in any way, please let us know.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No problem. I did have one question, and I know this was on DLS analysis. Could you elaborate a little bit more, if you're able to, on the training for the new board members? Like, just generally, how long does it take? What does it entail?
Yes, we have a board book, and senior members, whoever are on the board, conduct training based on cases that we've had. And I have gone out myself and done some training. And one time we had a particular board member that went around from county to county doing some training. And that's what I'm going to use the other staff person to do.
Okay. Specifically would help with training for new board members who are onboarding?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Colleagues, any further questions? Seeing none, I appreciate you. Have a great day.
All right, thank you.
All right, now we are going to transition to SDAT. David, you can begin when you are ready. And then once that's done, you all can approach.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. The State Department of Assessments and Taxation, or SDAT, is responsible for conducting property assessments statewide, administering property tax credit programs, and processing business filings in the state. The fiscal 2026 allowance decreases by $7.6 million, or 4.3%, to $168.9 million compared to fiscal 2025. The 2026 budget includes a $28.1 million reduction contingent on provisions in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act, or BRFA. 20.9 of general funds are swapped with 20.9 million of special funds due to a proposed change in cost sharing between local jurisdictions and SDAT as it pertains to SDAT's real property valuation, business personal property valuation, and information technology expenses. Current law stipulates that local jurisdictions pay for 50% and SDAT covers the other half of these expenses. The provision in the BRFA would change the 50-50 cost sharing split to a 90-10 split, which would cause local jurisdictions to now pay for 90% of these costs. The cost increases are broken down by jurisdiction in Appendix 5. The remaining $7.2 million of the contingent reduction is due to another provision that would freeze participation in the Enterprise Zone Real Property Tax Credit Program and repeal the Enterprise Zone Income Tax Credit. Moving to page 4, SDAT administers 4 tax credit programs. The Homestead Tax Credit limits the amount that a homeowner's property tax can increase following an assessment on their principal residence. The homeowner's tax credit and renter's tax credit are provided to individuals who qualify based on their income. The Enterprise Zone Tax Credit reimburses local governments for property tax credits given to businesses that are in or expand into designated enterprise zones and provides state income tax credits as well. Exhibit 1 on page 5, it shows the percentage of personal property returns that were assessed by October 31st in blue, and the orange bars show the percentage of the personal property assessable base that was assessed by October 31st. Personal property includes items such as computers, vehicles, furniture, machinery, and other personal objects. The percentage of personal property returns assessed in a timely manner has improved each year since fiscal 2021, when the annual report and personal property filing deadlines were pushed back from April 15th to July 15th during the pandemic. In fiscal 2024, SDAT assessed 82% of personal property returns by the goal of October 31st, which is on par with its performance in fiscal 2023. The percentage of the personal property local assessable base assessed by October 31st has decreased each year since fiscal 2018. In fiscal 24, 49% of the local assessable base was assessed by October 31st, which is a 1% decrease from the previous fiscal year. SDAT should discuss the reasons for the decrease in the percentage of the local assessable base assessed by October 31st in recent years and describe the efforts that it is taking to improve the timeliness of these assessments. Exhibit 2 on page 6 displays the assessable base in the blue bars, and the line represents the residential assessment to sales ratio, also known as the median assessment accuracy. The assessable base increased by 6.3% in fiscal 2024 compared to 2023, rising from $889.5 billion to $945.6 billion. Assessment accuracy increased by 2.3% in fiscal 24 to 92.5%. The closer the ratio is to 100%, the closer that assessments are to actual sale prices. The stated goal for assessment accuracy is between 90 and 110%. Moving to page 7, there are fiscal 2025 deficiency appropriations totaling $20.7 million, with the main one being $16.57 million for the homeowner's tax credit. Exhibit 3 on page 8 provides an overview of the agency spending. The tax credit programs account for 51%, or $85.1 million. The business and real property valuation programs comprise the second largest share at 29%, or $49.6 million. The charter unit, major information technology development projects, Office of the Director, and Office of Information Technology make up the remaining 20%, or $34.1 million of the allowance. Exhibit 4 on page 9 breaks the tax credit programs down into more detail. Out of the $85.1 million in the allowance, the homeowner's tax credit accounts for $56 million, or 2/3 of it. Enterprise zone tax credits account for 24%, or $20.8 million, after accounting for the $7.2 million contingent reduction. The renter's tax credit and administrative costs make up the remaining 10%. Exhibit 5 on page 10 displays the $7.6 million worth of changes in the fiscal 2026 allowance relative to the fiscal 25 working appropriation. The main personnel changes include increases of $3.86 million in salaries and associated fringe benefits, and $885,000 due to a lower turnover rate. Other major personnel changes include a decrease of $1.3 million for employee and retiree health insurance costs, and a decrease of $523,000 in position reclassification. Major non-personnel changes include an additional $6.2 million for the Cloud Revenue Integrated System and the Maryland Assessment Administration Evaluation System Information Technology projects. $1.58 million for real property evaluation contracts, and $516,000 for postage as well. Additionally, there is a decrease of $4.2 million for the Homeowner Protection Program, which helps homeowners avoid tax sales, a decrease of $7.99 million for the Enterprise Zone Tax Credit Program, and a decrease of $8.2 million for the Homeowner's Tax Credit. Moving to page 11, there's a correction that needs to be made to the allowance based on the contingent reductions in the BRFA. The allowance has a $20.9 million general fund reduction and a $20.9 million special fund increase due to the previously mentioned shift to a county-state 90/10 cost share. The Department of Legislative Services has calculated that the general fund reduction should be $21.2 million and the special fund increase should be $21.2 million, and SDAT has agreed with these calculations. SDAT and the Department of Budget Management should introduce a supplemental budget item to correct the contingent general fund reduction to $21,231,952 and special fund appropriation to the same amount. Exhibit 6 on page 12 shows the total property tax revenue for local jurisdictions. From fiscal 2019 to 2023, total actual property tax revenue increased by $1.25 billion, or 14.7%. From fiscal 2023 to 2025, it is estimated that total property tax revenue will increase by $1.04 billion, or 10.7%. Moving to Exhibit 7 on page 13, the Enterprise Zone Tax Credit Program is intended to encourage economic growth within economically distressed areas of the state and to increase employment of the chronically unemployed. Businesses located within an enterprise zone are eligible for local property tax credits and state income tax credits. Exhibit 7 lists the estimated reduction in general fund expenditures that are contingent on the BRFA. A reduction of $7.2 million of general fund expenditures is estimated for fiscal 26, which grows to $36.2 million in 2030. Also on page 13 is SDAT's personnel data for fiscal 26. There are 2 new positions in the Office of Information Technology, and among the 30 total vacant positions as of December 31st, 2024, only 4 have been vacant for more than 1 year. On page 14, high turnover for real property assessor positions has troubled SDAT for many years, primarily due to competitive salaries for similar positions in nearby states. Language in the 2025 budget bill restricted $50,000 in general funds pending 2 reports regarding vacancies and staffing in the real property evaluation program. $25,000 was released in October 2024 following the first report, and the second report was submitted in December 2024. Upon review, DLS determined the report to be in compliance with the budget language and therefore recommends that the remaining $25,000 in withheld general funds be released and will process a letter to this effect if no objections are raised by the subcommittee. Exhibit 8 on page 15 shows the vacant positions by month for real property assessors in calendar 2024. There is a notable drop in vacancies after July, which coincided with the salary review and salary increases that went into effect July 1st with the beginning of fiscal 2025. Exhibit 9 on page 16 displays those changes. Minimum assessor salaries increased between $0 and $4,331, and maximum salaries increased between $3,256 and $11,456. SDAT indicates these salary changes are the reason for decreased vacancies and that salary enhancements will also positively impact employee retention. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting that SDAT submit 2 reports to the budget committees on the vacancy rates for its real property assessor positions to ensure this trend continues. Exhibit 10 on page 17 shows the number of homeowners tax credit and renters tax credit applications along with the percentage of applications that were eligible. From fiscal 23 to 24, the number of homeowners tax credit applications increased by 5.3%, and the percentage of eligible applications increased by 1.2%, reaching a total of 64.7%. Over the same time span, the number of renters tax credit applications increased by 10.5%, and the percentage of eligible applications decreased by 9.8% for a total of 47%. SDAT has noted that one long-term factor influencing eligibility levels could be that the income threshold determining eligibility trails behind wage and salary inflation. As of January 2025, the income eligibility requirements for the homeowner's tax credit have been in place for over 18 years, with renters tax credit eligibility requirements in place for over 7 years. Exhibit 11 on page 18 shows homeowners tax credit spending from fiscal 2017 to the 2026 allowance. Tax credit utilization saw a downward trend from fiscal 21 to 23 before increasing to $60 million in fiscal 24. The fiscal 25 budget initially provided only $48 million for the homeowner's tax credit based on fiscal 23 actual spending, but a proposed efficiency appropriation increases the working appropriation by $16.3 million to $64.3 million. The fiscal 26 allowance of $56 million places homeowners tax credit spending lower than actual fiscal 24 spending, despite the recent increases in applications and percentage of eligible applications. SDAT should discuss whether the fiscal 2026 allowance for the homeowner's tax credit is adequate based on recent participation trends and projected fiscal 2025 spending. Exhibit 12 on page 19 shows renters' tax credit spending from fiscal 2017 to the 2026 allowance. Following a significant decrease in renters' tax credit spending from fiscal 20 to 21, there is a steady decline from fiscal 21 to 23. Renters' tax credit payments in fiscal 24 surged to nearly the 2020 level, increasing by $1.7 million, or 63% from fiscal 23. Renters' tax credit spending declines by $1.4 million, or 32% from fiscal 24 to the 2025 working appropriation due to a negative deficiency withdrawing that amount. The fiscal 26 allowance for the renters' tax credit is essentially level funded, increasing by $100,000 compared to the fiscal 25 working appropriation. SDAT should comment on why renters' tax credit utilization increased significantly in fiscal 2024 and why it is estimated to return to just above fiscal 2023 spending levels in fiscal 2025 and 2026. Exhibit 13 on page 20 displays the total funding for the Cloud Revenue Integrated System, or CRIS, major IT project. CRIS will allow for the redevelopment of mainframe applications onto a cloud-based platform that will streamline customer interactions and replace many paper-based processes. Total project funding in the fiscal 26 allowance is $37.7 million, and funding has increased by more than $5 million in each of the prior 2 fiscal years due to rising costs and delays. SDAT should discuss why the estimated costs for CRIS have continued to rise in recent fiscal years, what new scope has been added to the project, the reasons for expanding the scope, and the accuracy of its current total cost estimate of $36.4 million. Moving to page 21, in response to language in the fiscal 2025 budget bill restricting $50,000 in general funds, pending a report regarding the status of CRIS and SDAT's cybersecurity needs, SDAT submitted the second of 2 required reports in December of 2024. $25,000 of withheld funds was released after their first report was submitted, and upon review of the latest report, DLS recommends that the remaining $25,000 in withheld general funds be released and will process a letter to this effect if no objections are raised by the subcommittee. Additionally, DLS recommends adding language restricting funds in the fiscal 2026 budget for the purpose of administration until SDAT submits 2 more reports updating the committees on the status of the CRIS project. The language for each of the 2 recommended operating budget actions in this analysis can be found on pages 22 and 23. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, David. Colleagues, any questions for him? Seeing none, you all can approach and begin when you're ready. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Dan Phillips, Director of the Department of Assessments and Taxation. I do want to introduce you to our new leadership team because there's been a whole new leadership team in at SDAT since the last session. So I have with me today Deputy Director Bob Yeager, Associate Director Maria Mathias, and our Chief Financial Officer Aubrey Bascombe. I also have with us Government Affairs Director Josh Greenberg and our Public Information Officer Miles Handy with us today. First of all, I'd like to thank DLS for working closely with us to put together this budget analysis. I'll keep this short so we can get to any questions. The past year has been a transformational change for the department, and I appreciate the opportunity to update this subcommittee on some of the work we've accomplished. During the past year, the department has officially completed its move to the new headquarters in Baltimore City. And for the first time since before the pandemic, we have reopened a public access counter for businesses and tax credit applications to be presented in person. As part of us reopening this, we've also implemented an online appointment system so that for those who wish to make appointments for coming in to more efficiently serve the customers, they can do that online. This is simply done to enhance our service to the public. The department has also engaged in several projects aimed at modernizing and streamlining our customer service experiences, particularly in our tax credit and business service divisions. The department's Cloud Revenue Systems, Integrated Systems, CRIS project is well underway. The project will help the department transition away from legacy systems, which are nearly impossible to find programmers for the mainframe system at the Annapolis Data Center. Over the next 2 years, the department's entire business Maryland Business Express system will be migrated to the cloud, making the software more flexible to accommodate the needs of Maryland's growing business community. The department notes that DLS points out increases in costs for the CRISP conversion. One part of this project, moving the tax credit application system to one-stop, has increased in cost due to changes in end-user functionality and legislatively mandated new scope. This is something that the initial project did not meet our expectations in the speed of calculations and ease of use, and we've had to request changes to that, which did increase the cost of that. The department has added a Chief Information Security Officer as an item that was brought up in the legislative survey and from the audit that was done by the Legislative Services to fill that position because that was reported as a deficiency of the department. The legislative report also indicates we've had a number of vacancies that have existed for over 1 year. At this time, we have 2 of those positions still open. One of them, we have selected a candidate who starts next Wednesday. The other position is actually filled by someone in an acting capacity while they're learning the job because it involves utility valuation that's fairly complex. So we put somebody in that as an acting capacity for training purposes, and then they will move into that role full time. The department is currently in the process of implementing quite a few legislative mandated changes coming out of the 2024 session, including changes to the homeowners protection program. These are key focuses of outreach for our tax sale ombudsman to ensure that property owners are not losing their property to tax sale. We will continue to make sure that we collaborate with our partners here in the General Assembly to carry out the law faithfully and with your vision in mind. I will say that DLS has asked us to comment on the slight decrease in the percentage of the local assessable base reported by October 31. This is for our business personal property. And I will state that the last 2 years by October 31st, we had processed 82% of the returns. That has been increasing each year, and last year it was stable, but we did extend the deadline. With the Key Bridge collapse, we moved the deadline for all reporting for businesses from April 15th to June 17th. And this was to make sure that none of them fell into a position where they were not in good standing and not eligible for any assistance if they were impacted by that collapse. That meant we didn't get the reports as early as possible, but we still had completed 82% by the time of October. With this also, in our personal property division, we do triage these assessments by the size of the account. We look at the 5 largest accounts in each county first, and then the top 100 largest accounts from the previous year so that they are all assessed by that deadline. This means that the ones that we still have to look are the smallest accounts in the state. I also will point out that there's been a decrease in the amount of the actual assessable base. Some of this is a result of changes from a couple years ago. One of the items that we have found, and we have an existing bill in this session to allow us to audit accounts where they declare that they have less than $20,000 of property. That is something that we had discovered that we had a growing number of companies that were just checking the box, and the current law says we cannot audit them. We cannot question them or request the information. So we have come to the legislature and asked if we can have that authority. We don't want to do it unless it shows that there's a big change. But if somebody reports a drastic drop and saying now they don't have any property that's eligible for the personal property tax, we want to at least be able to question it and look at that. So that is an initiative that we are currently undergoing. Since my appointment, I've been focused on making key improvements to our tax credit divisions, provide Marylanders with a smooth customer experience. Internally, we've been working on making changes in how our tax credit systems are audited to ensure fairness and reduce waste wherever possible. We have a current RFP out where we're seeking to partner with some national companies that collect homestead credit information from across the country so that we can cross-check those against our records to make sure there's no citizens that are are living in other states that are applying for a credit here to make sure we're combating any fraud. We've also been having enhancements where we are sharing data with other partner agencies, including getting rent rolls of registered rentals so that we can compare that to the list of homestead credits. And we have, beginning last summer, been working in cooperation with the Comptroller's Office to be able to access their information to then be able to utilize that as a method of verifying home ownership and the residency of our people who are applying for homeowners tax credits. DLS correctly pointed out that our fiscal 26 estimates for homeowners tax credits are lower than 2024 and 2025. Those previous figures include some legacy payments from prior years to counties that had not paid because they had not submitted the proper documentation to our office. We anticipate that the future projections will only include payments that are anticipated for that fiscal year. For our renter's tax credits, the 2024 number saw a spike due to some software implementation issues and staff shortages in the year 2023. That moved some of those payments into the next fiscal year. We do not anticipate that this is going to continue to be an issue. Before I finish, I would like to address real quickly the reassessment notice mailing error from last year. We did further simplify our notice this year in cooperation with working with the vendor to make it simpler for them to print and process things while providing all the key information that is required under the statute for us to include in the notices. We added some different audit checks, including additional visits to the vendor. We set up some checks to allow us to better track what they were printing, including getting PDF copies of every notice that they printed so that we can cross-check and do spot checks on those. And to this date, we have not had any problems with this year's mailing. And I do say that they have been extremely cooperative with us, and I value the partnership that we have with that vendor. As a director, I believe that any challenge can be met when we all work together. I continue to emphasize the importance of collaboration in everything we do as an agency, because at the end of the day, we all want what's best for the people of Maryland. So once again, I'd like to thank you for our continued partnership. I look forward to a productive session. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Phillips and team. Appreciate you seeing here your thorough response to both DLS and some of our likely anticipated questions. I will start with some commentary from my Vice Chair, Delegate Ivey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Director, and to the whole team. Congratulations on being put into these positions. I want to thank you all for the transparency and the work that you've been doing up to this point. Mr. Handy has been a great help in, keeping us abreast to what we are curious about. One thing I did want to just bring up, and I heard you mention fairness earlier in your testimony. There were individuals last year, and you alluded to it, who had some complaints about their assessments being unfairly low, different complaints, some even making allegations of racial discrimination. If you could just speak to that issue. Again, I'm not here to point at you all. You all are a new team, and I've really appreciated the work and your presentation today, but I just wanted you to be a little explicit about this issue.
Certainly. I will say that while I'm new to this position, I've got 36 years with the department on the real property division until the past year, so I know that I've been deeply involved in that. I know that the last couple of years there have been a couple of studies that were published that were indicating some discriminatory practices, not in Maryland, but in other locations. One of the recommendations that had occurred in those was they had recommended that you not assess on broad areas. They recommended doing smaller areas for reassessment, so you're looking at properties in that particular neighborhood. In the particular case of Maryland, we have about 460 geographical zip codes, and I mentioned this just because those studies said that they recommended that reassessment areas be as small as zip code areas. so that you're looking at properties just in that area. Well, there's 460 some zip code areas that are geographically in the state. We have over 36,000 neighborhoods identified. So each one of those zip codes is broken down into about 900 neighborhoods where we're looking at just what's happening in those neighborhoods. And that's partly so that we're not comparing something that's going up very fast to a neighborhood that maybe not be appreciating as quickly, or vice versa, to make sure it's as fair as possible. We certainly do training. We have actually a little over half of the accounts in the state of Maryland. The offices are run, the supervisor assessments are minorities. So we have a very good minority representation. Our goal is to be fair to every taxpayer, and we make every attempt to make sure that there's nothing that's done, that's racially biased in any manner.
I really appreciate the candor and the transparency. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
No problem. Colleagues, any further questions for them? So I had some brief ones that you largely addressed. So if you want to elaborate more, fine. If not, I just want to acknowledge I appreciate you addressing the legislation piece on SDAT, on being able to possibly audit some of these self-reporting companies. We might be missing out there, particularly on fraud. So the agency there is good to know. And if there's any collaboration from our part, let us know there. The increase in costs for the cloud project was one of the things that I think many of my colleagues were a little concerned on. You helped to address, I think, some of the change in scope there. I did want to know if you can elaborate a little bit more, because you did say that some of it was legislative in nature. I just want to know if you can elaborate a little bit there on kind of like this scope change and why. My understanding is the project in total was around 25 million, and now we're up to 37 or so, which, my math, that's a 40% increase. So I know there's been some legislative changing, but I'm just wondering, that's a 40% increase is pretty large.
It is large. It's not something that we are happy about. A couple of those changes were changing the application deadlines for homeowners and property tax credits. That was House Bill 154, Senate Bill 286 last year. Another one was changing to where the property owner could attest to the income if all they had was Social Security and did not require them to file an income tax return. They could attest to that information and not have to file, the tax returns for that. And another one was the how we calculate the assets. The problem is each of those required programming changes, and programming changes run up the cost of any of these software projects. We did change last year, starting last summer. The department had this contract had been operating essentially on a time basis, how much time they were spending. We did change everything so that it's all results oriented. They're not getting paid till they meet the standard of what we're doing, because we felt like the project was running too long and not meeting the standards we needed. So we have changed that in the project. But the fact that they had not necessarily met our standards had contributed to the cost. And that's something that was unacceptable to us.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys shifting that too, because just as you articulate it, the incentive is wrong, right?
Absolutely.
And the incentive is to take as long as possible on the taxpayer's dime. And with the tough times we see ourselves in right now, I think we are looking at value to be as efficient with taxpayers' money as possible. I appreciate that. One other question I had, this was, I think, in reference to the DLS analysis on page 14, where it said, I think we're finding an average of 94 days to fill a vacancy. Is that standard, about 3 months to fill, from, I guess, advertising to getting someone in?
It probably says
Because I know the
45.
challenge we had was salaries for some
Right.
part, but I know we also compete in the region, just based on the way Maryland is set up with Virginia, with other places. So
Right.
what I'm really wondering is the people we're competing with, is that comparable to them? Are we more? Are we in line? Because if we want to retain, I just want to know where are we at with that?
I've not really looked to see how long it takes them to process that.
Okay.
When we advertise, we have to go through certain steps of verifying the position with Department of Budget and Management, getting the approval for that position. It has to be out on the street available for several weeks. It then takes time to process that, schedule interviews. Could we do better than 45 days? I think so. But I don't think that's that unusual for most of the industries as far as filling a position that becomes vacant. If you're going to properly advertise it and go through and interview candidates.
Yeah, no, I'm not knocking you. I want to be clear. But that's why I was asking, is it standard for your industry? Because I know what was referenced specifically was that we were losing people specifically for pay to other jurisdictions. So I was wondering, with the increased pay and the timeline from vacancy to fill, are we comparable now? So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just wondering, are we comparable?
As far as the time to fill a position, I really just don't know because I don't know how long it's taking them. I do know that we have reduced our vacancy significantly. The salary adjustment has been a phenomenal help. We greatly appreciate that. And we really are in a position now where we are able to compete and we're maintaining our staffing. You can see the numbers of vacant positions
it's
we
going
have are
very
greatly
well.
reduced. And most of those are occurring now are retirements, not people leaving to go to other organizations, which is fantastic, because if we can have somebody stay around for 30 plus years and retire, then that's great.
That's awesome. One last thing I have, which really you don't have to respond to, it's more just based off the proposed changes from 50-50 to 90-10. I'm just acknowledging that, one of the conversations we're having, colleagues, this will be pushing millions of dollars of responsibility onto our locals. This analysis kind of put that on Front Street for us. I know you all don't have any agency in that, but for us, that's something we're going to have to continue to talk about as we address the challenges ahead of us.
No, we understand that can be a sensitive issue. We certainly work closely with all of our counties and our county officials, with MACO, with MML. I mean, it's important to us to, I've always said we have a couple different client groups. One being all the property owners of the state of Maryland, the businesses of the state of Maryland is another, and then all of the local governments. And what we do is vital to them, but we always have maintained a very good partnership with them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Colleagues, any further questions? Seeing none, you all have a fantastic day. We are
Thank you
adjourned.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.